Jessy heard the door before she saw it move. She was in the shower when the front door of her apartment opened. Not knocked. Opened. With a key that was not hers and had not been given by her, and the sound of it cut through the water and the steam and hit her nervous system the way 11 years of FBI training had wired it to respond, not with panic, with precision. She turned the shower off. She stepped out without reaching for a towel. She moved to the bathroom door and pressed herself against the wall beside it and listened, which was a skill she had spent a decade in federal service making automatic, and what she heard was 2 sets of footsteps, unhurried, deliberate, moving through her living room, like they owned it. Her phone was on the bathroom counter. She picked it up. She did not call anyone. She opened the camera and angled it into the slim gap of the bathroom door and watched. 2 men, black suits, both Korean, one near the kitchen table, one near the window. The one at the window was watching the street below with the practiced stillness of a man standing guard. The one at the kitchen table was setting down an envelope, white, thick, sealed, with the deliberateness of someone completing a task they had been given specific instructions for and intended to complete without error. Neither of them was looking for her. They already knew where she was. The one at the table straightened up and said, in English, without raising his voice, without turning toward the bathroom, in the tone of a man who had done this before and found it unremarkable. Mrs. Shin requests a response by noon. The terms are in the envelope. Then both men walked out. The front door closed. The apartment went silent. Jessy stood against the bathroom wall for exactly 4 seconds. Then she wrapped a towel around herself, walked to the kitchen table, and looked at the envelope. Her hands were steady. They were always steady. That was the thing. People who knew her understood, and the thing people who underestimated her always found out too late. She picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of cream paper with 3 lines typed in the center. $2 million, clean break, no contact. The account details are enclosed. Consider carefully what you are walking away from and what you are walking into. Behind the letter was a bank transfer form, already filled out, waiting only for her signature and her account number. She read both pages twice. Then she set them on the table, walked back to the bathroom, finished her shower, and got dressed. Because Jessy Caldwell was a woman who finished what she started. And she was not finished here, not even close. Mrs. Shin was Ryu Jisoo's mother, the woman who ran one of the most feared criminal organizations in South Korea, from behind a desk that looked like it belonged in a museum. The woman who had never met Jessy, had never called her, had never once acknowledged in 7 months that her son had been seeing the same woman, and had now sent 2 men with a key to her apartment at 7:14 in the morning with $2 million and a quietly worded threat dressed up as an offer. Consider carefully what you are walking into. Jessy buttoned her jacket and looked at herself in the mirror. She had walked into worse things. She had walked into a warehouse in Baltimore that smelled like rust and bad decisions, wearing a wire so thin it could have passed for jewelry. She had sat across from men who had done terrible things and looked at them with the calm of someone who already knew the ending. She had spent 11 years at the FBI Financial Crimes Unit, being the person in the room that nobody saw coming until it was far too late to do anything about it. Mrs. Shin had sent 2 men and an envelope. Jessy picked up her phone and called her best friend, Zara. Zara answered on the first ring because it was 7:20 in the morning, and Zara had been up since 5, which meant she was either prepping for trial or stress-eating cereal, and from the crunching in the background, it was definitely the cereal. "2 men just let themselves into my apartment," Jessy said. The crunching stopped immediately. "Are you hurt?" "No. They left an envelope." "What kind of envelope?" "The kind with $2 million in it." Jessy looked at the bank transfer form on the table. "Jisoo's mother wants me gone by noon." 3 full seconds of silence from Zara, which from Zara, a woman who argued for a living and considered silence a personal failure, meant the information was significant enough to stop her completely. "Jessy," she said finally. 2 million. Yes, Zara. They had a key to your apartment." "Yeah. That means someone close to Jisoo gave it to them, and someone who knows your address, your door code, your entire schedule." "I know what it means," Jessy said quietly. "That is exactly why I am calling you before I do anything." Another pause. "What are you going to do?" Jessy looked at the envelope. She looked at the transfer form with its clean lines and its neat waiting spaces where her name and account number were supposed to go. She thought about 7 months of a man who argued with her about everything and was right about half of it, which she respected more than if he had been right about all of it, who had remembered, 6 weeks after she mentioned it once in passing, that she preferred a specific brand of honey from a market in Busan, who had looked at her on their 3rd date with the particular directness that was either his best quality or his most dangerous one, and said, "I have not met anyone like you, and I do not yet know what to do about that." She thought about $2 million. Then she thought about that last line on the cream paper. That line was not advice. It was a warning. And warnings, in Jessy's professional experience, were only ever issued by people who were genuinely afraid of what you might find, which meant there was something to find. "I'm going to find out," she said, "exactly what she doesn't want me to walk into." "Jessy, I'll call you tonight," she said. She hung up. She made coffee. She sat down at her laptop, and she went to work. Here is what you need to know about Jessy Caldwell before the rest of this story makes complete sense. She was 34 years old, and she had grown up in Atlanta, and the only child of a high school math teacher who believed that precision was a form of love and had raised her daughter accordingly. She had gone to Spelman on a full academic scholarship, graduated top of her class, and walked directly into the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit at 22 because she had understood from an early age that the most dangerous crimes were not the loud ones. They were the quiet ones, the ones committed in offices with clean carpets by men with clean hands who understood that the law moved slowly and that patience was its own weapon. Jessy had decided early that she would be patient too. For 11 years she had been the analyst who found what other people missed. The woman who could look at 40 pages of financial records and hear the one wrong note in the entire document, the way a musician heard a flat in an orchestra. She had built cases that ended careers, closed files that had been open for years, and worked with the focused intensity of someone who understood that the work was the point, not the applause for it. She had resigned at 33, not because she had failed, because she had been too good and had watched the results of her work handled badly too many times by people above her, with interests she did not share. She had left on a Wednesday afternoon quietly and had been in Seoul within 3 months, building a private security consulting practice that had grown in 8 months into something with 4 retainer clients and a waiting list. She had not planned Ryu Jisoo, and he had happened at a dinner party thrown by a mutual acquaintance, a Korean-American architect who collected interesting people and placed them in rooms together and let the results occur naturally. Jisoo had been across the table from her, and they had disagreed for 2 hours about the ethics of private security operations in conflict zones, and by the end of the evening she had his number in her phone and a very clear picture of exactly who he was. He ran the Shin organization, third generation, inherited at 30 from a father who had died young and handed him an empire with the full knowledge of what it was and what maintaining it cost. The legitimate face of the organization was Shin Global Holdings, construction, logistics, hospitality, private security. The less legitimate architecture underneath it was the thing that her former FBI colleagues would have found professionally interesting. She had known all of this before she agreed to have dinner with him. She had gone anyway, because people were not their files. She had learned that in year 2 at the bureau, and had never unlearned it. And the man across the dinner table from her was not what the file said alone. He was also the person who had argued with her with genuine intellectual engagement, who had admitted twice in one evening that she was right, which was twice more than most men managed in a year, and who had the particular quality of someone who had been surrounded his entire life by people who agreed with him and had decided, somewhere along the way, that agreement was not the same as truth. And 7 months later, she knew this not from assessment, but from the daily knowledge of someone who had been paying attention. And now his mother had sent 2 men and an envelope. She needed to know why the timing was now. Why $2 million? Why the urgency of a noon deadline on a Thursday morning? Something had changed recently. Something had made her presence feel dangerous enough to spend $2 million removing. She started with the public records, property filings, business registrations, corporate announcements connected to the Shin organization in the past 30 days. She was methodical, and she was fast, and she moved through databases with the efficiency of someone who had spent 11 years knowing exactly where to look. By 11 a.m. she had found something. By noon she had verified it. By 1 p.m. and she understood everything. The Shin organization was in the middle of a merger, not a legitimate business merger, though there was one of those being conducted above board with the proper attorneys and the proper filings. No. Underneath that merger, threaded through it like a wire hidden inside a wall, was a second deal. A secret arrangement between the Shin organization and a rival family, called the Kwon Group, who controlled significant criminal operations across 3 provinces and had been in a quiet Cold War with the Shins for the better part of a decade. The deal was a consolidation, a joining of 2 organizations into one structure that would be, when completed, the most powerful and dangerous criminal organization in South Korea. The deal had been in negotiation for 6 months. It was scheduled to close in 3 weeks. And the lead negotiator on the Kwon side, the man who had been sitting across from the Shin family at every private meeting, had one condition that was not open for discussion. Jessy found it in a document she accessed through a database that had been improperly secured by someone who had been careless about their digital filing. She found it the way she found most things, by following a chain of smaller documents that each pointed toward a larger one, and then finding the larger one. The condition was written in the careful language of lawyers, but its meaning was plain. The Shin family had to demonstrate, before the deal closed, that there were no security vulnerabilities in their operation, no loose ends, no one with access to sensitive information who was not fully controlled. And the exact phrase used was, "All personal relationships of the principal must be vetted and resolved prior to signing." The principal was Ryu Jisoo. His personal relationship was Jessy, a former FBI financial crimes analyst with 11 years of experience, investigating exactly the kind of organizations sitting across from each other at this negotiating table, was not a person that either family wanted anywhere near the closing of this deal. She was not a loose end. She was a liability. $2 million to make her disappear quietly was, from their perspective, efficient housekeeping. Jessy sat back from her laptop. She looked at the ceiling. She thought about the cream paper and the bank transfer form still sitting on her kitchen table. She thought about what this meant for Jessy specifically, whether he knew about the merger's conditions, whether he had sent those men, or whether his mother had moved without telling him, whether the man who had called her 2 days ago from Busan, his voice easy and warm, telling her he had found the honey, was the same man who had allowed his mother to have a key cut to her apartment. She needed to know which version she was in. She picked up her phone. She did not call Jessy. She called a woman named Director Park. Director Park Soo-yeon ran the organized crime division of a Korean law enforcement agency that Jessy had established a careful professional relationship with in her first month in Seoul, because operating alone in unfamiliar territory, without a contact on the right side of the law, was not caution, it was recklessness, and Jessy was never reckless. They had met 4 times. They had shared information twice, small things, professionally useful to both sides. They had developed the kind of mutual regard that formed between 2 precise women who recognized in each other a shared standard of work. Director Park answered her direct line on the second ring. "Miss Caldwell," she said. "I have something significant," Jessy said. "I need to know if you want it before I say more." A brief pause. "How significant?" "Shinkwon consolidation. 3 weeks to closing." The pause this time was longer. When Director Park spoke again, her voice had a different quality, the quality of a person sitting forward. "That consolidation has been a rumor in this office for 6 months. We have not been able to confirm it." "I can confirm it," Jessy said. "I have the deal structure, the negotiation timeline, on the conditions for closing, and the names of every person at every meeting." She paused. "I also have a personal connection to the principal on the Shin side that gives you access you currently don't have. What do you need in return?" "One thing, protection for a specific individual from any charges arising from cooperation with your investigation. I need it documented and signed before I deliver anything." Director Park was quiet for a moment. "You're asking me to protect someone before I know what they're cooperating against. I'm asking because without that protection there is no cooperation," Jessy said. "And without the cooperation you have 3 weeks before this deal closes and creates something that neither of us wants to exist." She paused. "I am not calling you because I need your help, Director, and I am calling you because you need mine. Those are different things." A long silence. "Tonight," Director Park said. 9 o'clock. Send me an address." Jessy sent the address. Then she put the phone down and sat in the quiet of her apartment and felt the weight of what she was setting in motion, because she was not a woman who moved without understanding the full cost of movement, and the full cost of this was significant. It involved a man who had kissed her forehead before he left for Busan and said he would be back Friday. It involved an organization that people had spent their entire lives building. It involved a decision she could not take back once it was made. She sat with the weight of it for exactly 10 minutes. Then she picked up her pen and started writing. She was in the middle of building her documentation package when Jessy called at 5 p.m. She looked at his name on the screen. She thought about everything she now knew and everything she still needed to confirm. She answered. "How is Busan?" she said. "Raining," he said. "I found the honey." A pause. "You sound different." This was the thing about him that she had never fully accounted for in the early weeks when she had been carefully assessing him from a professional distance. He listened to her the way very few people listen to anyone. With his complete attention, he had learned her frequencies in a way that was occasionally inconvenient. "I'm deep in a case," she said, which was entirely true. "Okay. A beat. I'll be back Friday evening." "I know. Jessy." His voice shifted slightly into the register she recognized as the unmanaged one, the one that existed underneath the composed surface he showed the rest of the world. "Is everything all right?" She looked at the transfer form on the table. She made a decision. "We need to talk when you get back," she said. "In person." Silence. "Tell me now." "In person," she said. "Friday. It can wait until Friday." "You're worrying me." "Don't," she said quietly. "I am completely fine. I just need to tell you something face to face." She paused. "Bring the honey." He exhaled slowly. "Friday," he said. "Friday," she said. She hung up. She went back to work. The meeting with Director Park lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes, and by the end of it, the protection agreement for Ryu Ji-soo had been drafted, reviewed, and signed by both of them. Director Park had read Jessy's documentation package in silence, all 37 pages of it, without expression, in the way of someone who had learned that expression during the reading of evidence was a luxury that interfered with clarity. When she finished, she closed the folder and looked at Jessy with the focused regard of a woman updating her understanding of another woman in real time. "You built this in one day," she said. "I had a clear starting point," Jessy said. "Most analysts with a clear starting point don't produce 37 pages in 8 hours. "I'm motivated," Jessy said. Director Park looked at the folder. "The merger conditions document. The language about personal relationships." She paused. "They tried to buy you. This morning. And your response was to build a case against them." "My response was to understand what they were protecting," Jessy said. "Once I understood that, the case built itself." Director Park was quiet for a moment. There was something in her expression that Jessy identified as the beginning of respect, the specific kind that formed between people who recognized in each other a shared way of operating. "When will you tell him?" Director Park asked. "Friday," Jessy said, "when he's back." "And if he doesn't cooperate?" Jessy looked at her steadily. "He will cooperate," she said. "When he understands what is being negotiated in his name without his full knowledge, he will cooperate." She paused. "I know him." Director Park looked at her for a long moment. "You are taking a significant personal risk," she said. "This will change things between you." "Yes," Jessy said simply. "It will. And you're doing it anyway." Jessy thought about the cream paper. "Consider carefully what you are walking away from and what you are walking into." "I have never made a decision based on what was comfortable," she said. "I'm not going to start now." Director Park nodded slowly. She picked up her pen and signed the protection agreement. Sue came back from Busan on Friday evening with the honey and a look on his face that told her he had spent 2 days in the rain, trying not to think about what she needed to tell him, and had failed. He set the honey on her kitchen counter. He looked at her. "Tell me," he said. She told him everything. The men at 7:14 in the morning, the key they had used that someone in his world had provided, the envelope, the $2 million, the bank transfer form still sitting on the kitchen table unsigned, the merger and its conditions, the 6 months of secret negotiations being conducted in his name, Director Park and the meeting and the protection agreement she had secured 2 nights ago that she placed in front of him now, so he could read every word of it himself. She told him in the order it had happened, clearly, without softening a single part of it, because she respected him enough to give him the complete and unedited truth. He did not interrupt. He stood in her kitchen and he listened with the stillness of a man holding something very large with great care. And she watched his face move through things she did not try to name because they were his, and they were private, and the only thing she could give him right now was the truth and the space to feel the weight of it. When she finished, the room, was very quiet. He looked at the protection agreement on the table. He looked at the bank transfer form beside it. He looked at the honey he had brought her from Busan still sitting on the counter. "My mother," he said, "sent men to your apartment." "Yes." "With a key." "Yes." His jaw tightened in the way it did when he was managing something that wanted to come out differently than controlled. "She did not tell me." "I know she didn't," Jessy said, "because if she had told you, you would have stopped her." He looked at her. "You know that," he said, not a question. "I know that," she said. Something in his face shifted. The tightness didn't leave, but something underneath it changed, the way a room changed when a window was opened. A small movement that altered the quality of everything. "The merger," he said. "I knew about the negotiation. I did not know about the conditions." He paused. "I did not know they had looked at you and decided you were a problem." "Do you believe that is true?" she said. It was a genuine question. She needed to know. He looked at her directly. "I did not know," he said. "I need you to believe that." She had built 11 years of professional judgment on her ability to hear the true thing underneath everything else. It was the skill her unit chief had called her most valuable asset. It was the thing she trusted more than documentation. She believed him. "Anna, then I need you to do something hard," she said. "Tell me." "I need you to cooperate with Director Park's investigation. I need you to give them everything, the Kwan side of this deal, every meeting, every document, every name, all of it." She held his gaze. "In exchange, you are fully protected. The agreement is signed and documented. Your cooperation is treated as an asset, not prosecuted as a liability." He was very still. "You arranged my protection," he said slowly, "before you told me any of this." "Yes." "You secured a signed agreement with the head of the Organized Crime Division before you even knew whether I would cooperate." "Yes." He looked at her. Something moved through his expression that she had not seen from him before, not in 7 months of paying close attention, and it took her a moment to identify it because it was not an expression she had expected to see on his face. He looked undone, not broken, not angry. Undone in the specific way of a man who had spent his entire life in a world where every person who said they were on his side had an angle, and had just encountered, for perhaps the first time, someone who had moved to protect him before she had anything to gain from it. "Why?" he said. His voice was quiet. "You could have gone to Director Park with everything and left me out of it. You could have simply disappeared. Len, you could have taken the $2 million and gone back to Atlanta and let this whole thing collapse without you in it." He took a step toward her. "Why did you do all of this?" She looked at him. She had prepared for most parts of this conversation. She was a woman who prepared the way other people breathed, automatically, continuously, without needing to think about it. But this question, asked in this way, in this quiet kitchen on a Friday evening with the honey from Busan still on the counter, reached past the preparation. "Because someone needs to fight for you the way you cannot fight for yourself right now," she said. "And I am very good at fighting." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up the protection agreement and read every word of it, slowly and carefully, the way a man read something that was going to change the shape of his life. When he finished, he set it down. He looked at the bank transfer form. He picked it up. He tore it in half. Then he looked at her with the expression of a man who had made a decision he was not going to unmake. "Tell me what you need from me," he said. "If you feel what Jessy and Jisoo are risking right now, you are exactly in the right place. This story is just getting started. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. And if Jessy's strength has moved you even a little, hit the like button right now. It means everything to this channel. He made the call to Director Park himself. Jessy sat in her living room and listened to Seoul outside the window and let him do it. Because he was not a man who needed to be accompanied through hard things once he had decided to do them. He went into the second bedroom and he closed the door and he talked for 3 hours and 20 minutes. She knew the duration because she watched the clock, not from anxiety, but with the focused attention of someone waiting for a phase of an operation to complete. When he came out, he looked the way people looked when they had just put down something they had been carrying for a long time and were feeling the unfamiliar lightness of it. She had made tea. He sat across from her and wrapped both hands around the cup. 3 hours, he said. I know. I gave them everything. I know. He looked at the table. My mother is going to believe you orchestrated this to destroy her. Your mother tried to buy me for $2 million, Jessy said, and instead of leaving, I went to work. What she believes about my motives is something only she can decide. He was quiet for a moment. She will not understand why you protected me. No, Jessy agreed. She won't, not at first. What does that mean? Not at first. It means, Jessy said carefully, that she is a woman who has run an organization for 40 years and learned to see everything as a variable to be managed. She looked at me, and she saw a threat, and she did what she always does with threats. She paused. She has never met someone who couldn't be managed. She doesn't yet know what to do with that. Another pause. She will figure it out eventually, and people like her always do. He looked at her. You are remarkably calm about a woman who sent men to your apartment this morning, he said. She sent men with an envelope, Jessy said. Not a threat I couldn't handle. She picked up her tea. The thing that concerned me was never the envelope, Jisoo. It was what the envelope told me about what was happening underneath the surface. That was worth being concerned about. He looked at her for a long moment. You know what the most frightening thing about you is, he said. Tell me. The calmest you get, he said, is when the situation is the most serious. Every other person I have ever known gets louder when things escalate. He shook his head slowly. You get quieter. She thought about this. Loud is for people who need to convince themselves they're not afraid, she said. I know exactly what I'm afraid of. Everything else gets quiet so I can hear clearly. He looked at her. What are you afraid of? He said. She held his gaze. Getting this wrong, she said. Any of it. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. It was not a grand gesture. It was a small one. The gesture of a man who was not accustomed to small gestures and was making one anyway, which made it mean more than a grand one would have. She looked at his hand on hers. She did not move away. The investigation moved the moment it moved, and it moved fast. Director Park's unit had been building toward the Kwan organization for 2 years, without the inside access they needed. Jisoo's cooperation provided everything that had been missing. Within the first week, 3 separate warrants were executed on Kwan properties across 2 provinces. The offices were sealed. The accounts were frozen. The lawyers arrived. Within 2 weeks, 4 of the Kwan organization's senior figures had been brought in for questioning. 2 of them, men who understood which direction the wind had turned, began cooperating with prosecutors. Their cooperation opened new directions. Those directions opened further ones. It had the particular momentum of a case that had been starved of fuel for 2 years and had now been handed a full tank. The Shin-Kwan merger collapsed completely. The deal that had been 3 weeks from closing ceased to exist, not with an announcement, not with a formal termination, but simply by the disappearance of the structure that had been holding it together. When the Kwan organization began to fracture internally, when the senior figures started calculating their own outcomes, when the lawyers started arriving, and the accounts started freezing, the merger dissolved, the way things dissolved when the people holding them together stopped being able to hold. Jessy followed the coverage from her apartment in Yongsan, reading each development with the focused attention of an analyst, cataloging outcomes, noting what had worked, noting what she would refine. Zara called on a Thursday. "It's in the news here," she said. "The Kwan arrests. Your name is not in any of it, but I know your work when I see it." "You know my work because you've been my best friend for 15 years. "I know your work," Zara said, "because you are the only person alive who dismantles an international criminal organization and still has dinner plans the same evening." A pause. "How is he?" Jessy was quiet for a moment. How was he? Since the night he had made the call to Director Park, things between them had changed in the way that things changed after two people had been in a serious situation together and had seen each other clearly under pressure. Not worse, different, more settled, like a picture that had been slightly out of focus that had now sharpened into what it had always been trying to be. His mother had not called him since the investigation became public. This was a weight he carried in the particular way he carried difficult things, without talking about it often, without letting it alter his surface. But she could see it in the moments when he was still and not performing stillness. She did not push him toward it. She let him hold it on his own timeline. He came to her apartment on Tuesday and Friday evenings. They cooked, or they ordered from the Itaewon restaurant, and they talked about work, and about the city, and about the small daily things that were the real architecture of a shared life, the things that didn't get mentioned in the stories people told about how they fell for each other, but that were, in truth, the substance of it. "He's working through things," she told Zara. "It takes time." "Are you happy?" She looked at the window. The word happy was one she used carefully. The way she used all precise things, only when it was the accurate word and not an approximation of something harder to name. "Ask me in 6 months," she said. "That is not a no," Zara said. "No," Jessy agreed. "It isn't." The meeting with Shin Myung-ja happened 6 weeks after the investigation became public, and it happened because Jisoo asked Jessy to come with him. He asked on a Friday evening in her kitchen without looking at her while he said it, which was how she knew it cost him something to ask. She said yes without hesitation. They drove to the Shin family home in Seongbuk, a property that was large without announcing itself, the architecture of old money that had nothing left to prove. The grounds were immaculate. The house was silent in the way of places that had been silent for a long time. Jisoo pulled up and stopped the car and sat without moving for a moment. "You don't have to do this," he said. "I know," she said. "She will not be warm." "She doesn't need to be warm," Jessy said. "She needs to be honest. Those are different things." He exhaled. He got out of the car. She got out beside him. They went in. Shin Myung-ja was waiting in the main sitting room, a space furnished with the deliberate restraint of someone who understood that real power did not need to perform itself. She was 61 years old, and she sat in the center of the room the way she had probably always occupied space, like the room had arranged itself around her rather than the other way. She looked at Jessy. Jessy looked back. Jisoo sat down. Jessy sat beside him. "You came," his mother said, to Jessy, not warmly, not coldly, with the measured assessment of a woman taking in information. "He asked me to," Jessy said. "I sent you a considerable sum of money to not be here." "You did. And you are sitting in my house." "Yes," Jessy said. The room was very quiet. You went to Director Park, Shin Myung-ja said. I did. You gave them my son. I protected your son, Jessy said, with the evenness of a woman who knew the distance between those two things. I gave them the Kwan organization. The distinction matters, and the documentation reflects it. The older woman looked at her for a long moment. Why? She said, and something in the way she asked it told Jessy this was the genuine question, the one underneath all the others, the one that had been sitting in this woman's mind for 6 weeks. Why did you not take the money? Jessy held her gaze. Because I don't make decisions based on envelopes other people place in front of me, she said. I make them based on what I have assessed to be true. She paused. I assessed that the merger would damage your son's future more than protect it. I assessed that he did not fully know what was being negotiated in his name, and I assessed that he was worth fighting for. She paused again. I was right about all three. Shin Myung-ja was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice had changed, not softened exactly, but the layer of managed composure had thinned slightly, the way armor thinned when the person inside it was considering whether it was still needed. My son is different since you, she said. He makes different decisions. He asks questions he did not ask before. She looked at Jessy with the attention of a woman who had spent 60 years reading people and was now revising a significant assessment. I looked at you and I saw a vulnerability in my organization. I treated you accordingly. I know, Jessy said. I was wrong about what you were. Yes, Jessy said. You were. I was right that you were dangerous. Yes, Jessy said. You were right about that too. Something shifted in the older woman's expression, something that was not quite a smile, but was in the direction of one, the expression of a woman encountering someone she had not expected, and was deciding slowly what to do with that. The Kwan consolidation, she said, if it had closed, it would have absorbed this organization into a structure you would not have controlled, Jessy said. The conditions were designed to strip your son of autonomy while giving him liability. The people on the Kwan side were not interested in a partnership, and they were interested in a takeover dressed as one. Shin Myung-ja looked at her steadily. You understood this from a document. From several documents, Jessy said, and from knowing how these structures work. The older woman was quiet. Then she said, I owe you an apology. The room held this. Jessy waited. Sending men to your apartment, Shin Myung-ja said, was the action of someone who was afraid and managed fear badly. It was an insult. She paused. Each word was deliberate. I am sorry for it. Beside her, Jessy felt Jisoo go very still. Thank you, Jessy said, simply and directly, because the apology had been simple and direct and deserved to be received that way. Jisoo reached over and placed his hand over his mother's on the armrest between them. A small gesture, the gesture of a man who was still carrying hurt and had chosen, in spite of it, to be present. His mother looked at his hand. Something moved across her face that Jessy looked away from, because it was private, and because some moments belonged only to the people inside them. On a Tuesday morning in March, 9 months after 2 men had walked into her apartment at 7:14 with a key that was not theirs, and a letter that had tried to tell her who she was and what she was worth, Jessy stood at the window of her office on the 14th floor of a building in Yonggu and looked at Seoul and felt the particular quality of a life that fit. Not perfectly. She did not trust perfect. Perfect was a category invented by people who needed things to be finished when life was never finished, only ongoing. But it fit the way things fit when they had been built honestly, piece by piece, with care and without apology. Her consulting practice had expanded into a second office. She had hired 2 people. She had a case that was going to require 6 months of work that she found genuinely interesting, which was, she had always believed, the only reliable measure of whether you were doing the right work. Jisoo had restructured the Shin organization's board. 3 new figures, all of them from the legitimate side of the business, had been brought in. The legitimization process that had been quietly underway for 3 years was moving faster now without the weight of the Kwon deal pressing down on it. He was rebuilding like a man who understood what the cost of not building carefully was, which was the only way Jessy had ever respected rebuilding. His mother had called her once, on a Wednesday afternoon 3 weeks ago. The call had lasted 11 minutes. It had not been a warm call. It had been a careful one, and careful from a woman like Shin Myung-ja was its own form of respect, and Jessy had received it accordingly. She was still not sure what they would become to each other. She was not in a hurry to decide. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Jisoo. She answered. "Are you working?" he said. "Yes." "Have you eaten breakfast?" She had not eaten breakfast. She had been at her desk since 6:45 and had forgotten entirely. "I'm fine," she said. "That's not an answer." "It's the answer I have." "I'm downstairs," he said. She looked out the window at the street 14 floors below. There was a black car at the curb that had not been there 10 minutes ago. "You're downstairs," she said. "I have food from the Itaewon restaurant. Come down or I'm coming up." She looked at the open case file on her desk. She looked at the street below. 5 minutes, she said. She saved her work. She picked up her jacket. She looked briefly at herself in the small mirror by the office door, at a woman who looked like someone who had decided something and had not revised the decision, because she had not. She took the elevator down. He was beside the car with a paper bag that smelled like exactly what she would have ordered, and he looked at her the way he had been looking at her for 9 months, like she was the most interesting problem he had ever encountered, and had decided the problem was the point. "You didn't eat," he said. "I was working." "You're always working." "Yes," she said. "That's accurate." He handed her the bag. She took it. They stood on the pavement with Seoul moving around them, enormous and alive, and completely indifferent to the 2 people standing at its edge, sorting out what they were to each other. "My mother called me last night," he said. She looked at him. "She said to tell you," he paused, choosing the words carefully in the way he did when the words mattered, "that she was wrong about what she thought could be bought." Jessy looked at him steadily. "That's a significant thing for her to say," she said. "Yes," he said. "It is." She thought about an envelope on a kitchen table, a bank transfer form with its waiting spaces that had never been filled, the cream paper with its 3 lines and its quiet warning that had pointed her, in the end, not away from something but directly toward it. She thought about a woman who had spent 60 years managing everything and had met, for the first time, something that refused to be managed. "Tell her," Jessy said, "that I appreciate it." He nodded. They stood in the morning light and opened the bag and ate right there on the pavement because the food was hot and the morning was good, and there was nowhere else either of them needed to be. The bank transfer form was still in the bottom drawer of her desk at home. She had kept it, unsigned, as documentation, as a record of a morning when someone had looked at her and decided she was a variable with a price, and had been completely, permanently, and irreversibly wrong. When some things could not be purchased, she had known that her whole life. She was glad now that someone else knew it too. 3 months after that morning on the pavement, Jessy Caldwell stood at a podium at a women's leadership conference in Seoul and looked out at 400 women, in a room that had gone completely quiet. She had been asked to speak about resilience, about what it meant to hold your ground when the people around you had decided the ground wasn't yours. She looked at the room. She thought about 7:14 in the morning and 2 men with a key. She thought about cream paper and a warning that had pointed her, accidentally, toward everything she needed to find. She thought about Director Park across a restaurant table signing a document at 9 o'clock at night. She thought about a man making a phone call that changed the architecture of his life and coming out of the room afterward and picking up a cup of tea. She leaned into the microphone. "I want to talk to you today," she said, "about the morning someone decided I had a price, and what I did before noon." The room was completely still. "They sent 2 men to my apartment," she said. "They had a key I hadn't given them. They left an envelope on my kitchen table with a number on it, and a line at the bottom that said, 'Consider carefully what you are walking into.'" She paused. That line was meant to frighten me. What it did instead was tell me something more useful. She looked out at the 400 faces. It told me they were afraid of what I might find, and that meant there was something to find. She let the room hold this. "The most dangerous thing you can do to a woman who has spent her life learning to see clearly," she said, "is give her a reason to look." A pause. "They gave me a reason. I looked, and what I found dismantled everything they had spent years building." She looked out at the room. "Do not ever let anyone hand you a number and tell you that's what you are worth," she said. "Your worth is not a number. It is not an envelope. It is not a transfer form waiting for a signature you are never going to give." She paused. "It is the sum of everything you know, everything you have survived, and everything you are still building." She looked at every face she could see. "And it is not for sale." The applause started before she finished the sentence. She stood at the podium and received it without shrinking, without performing, and without making herself smaller than she was, because she had spent enough of her life adjusting her size to fit the comfort of rooms that were not ready for her, and she was permanently finished with that particular habit. She was in a room now that was ready. She stood in it, exactly as she was, which, as it turned out, was more than enough. If you made it to the end of this story, then you already know that Jessy is family. Drop a comment right now and tell us, was she right to go to the authorities, or should she have handled it differently? And what do you think about the mother's apology? Did she deserve forgiveness? Subscribe to this channel because we post a brand new story every single week, and every single one of them is about women who refuse to be managed, underestimated, or bought. You do not want to miss what is coming next, like this video for Jessy. She earned every single one